No borders, right? No borders. No borders. Hey, the bees have no borders.
That is correct.
Bees have no borders. I'm sorry.
Hi, can you hear me? I heard him say, yeah. I forgot to bring my bell. I have a bell.
Everybody should be quiet and listen to Tracy. That's your bell.
Are you ready? You good?
I believe so.
Oh, awesome. Look at that. We're together. Everybody sign in that wants to be signed in on our sign-in computer or paper. Paper? Couple things, couple housekeeping items. Number one, we have a great speaker tonight, and we're gonna allow him to have almost all of our time because he's a great speaker, and we're excited to have him, Dr. Tew from Auburn, formerly of Ohio State University. So looking forward to hearing that. But first, a couple things. The fall, oh, it's over.
Yeah.
Sorry about that. Beekeepers of Indiana, Indiana Bee School is always the last Saturday of February. It always sells out. That sign up is available at their website now. I would encourage you not to wait because they will close it. There will not be walk-in attendance. So that is always the last Saturday of February. It's terrific bee school, lots of great speakers, and all the vendors, big and small, no shipping, of course, you can pick it up there. It will be in Muncie again this year. That was a terrific location. I'm very pleased about that. Allows us to have, yeah, just a great conference. So Beekeepers of Indiana Bee School, end of February. Number two, next month, our meeting here is a party, a Christmas, the holiday party, is that correct?
Yeah.
And it's a pitch-in, is that correct? Yep. And the core group is providing chili, multiple pots of chili, and you guys are asked to bring any side that you would like and your own beverage, non-alcoholic beverage, is that correct? They're supposed to bring their own drinks as well. So we will have a pitch-in holiday party. We'll probably play Bee Knowledge Jeopardy or something ridiculous like that. And I think we have great door prizes, and we appreciate so much all the money you guys pour into the raffles every month, which allow us to have great speakers like we had last month and again this month. That's where that money goes. We appreciate that very much. So next month at our party, there will be door prizes. We're not asking you to bring any money for raffle. You'll all receive tickets when you get here, and we will have great prizes. So please come and be prepared to eat while you're here. Other things. Our core group meeting is December 2nd. That's where leadership gets together and we eat and fellowship and plan many months going out. We have a new liaison for beginner beekeepers who's going to be working with us, helping make sure that we're covering bases well for beginners. But the core group is open to anybody who wants to participate. We always need more help doing all these things that we do. There's only a few of us. So if you'd like to participate, or you have a special skill that you think would be helpful, we would love to have you. And even if that special skill is, hey, I'm on Facebook half the day, most of the weeks, we would love to have you because we don't have somebody to coordinate those kinds of things for us. So feel free to be in touch with any one of us, and we can let you know the secret meeting location and time. Is that it? How many people saw bees flying today? How many people actually got in bees today? I put on mouse guards on the front and did not use the phrase, I'm just gonna, because when I say that, I guarantee you I will get stung. So went down and did a couple of mouse guard adjustments. So everybody got bees ready? I already lost a hive this summer. I found out that's gone.
And if you need candy words.
Candy boards for sale, 8 and 10 frame. They are here. They are available, and they are how much? $13. They are basket.
16 and 12, I thought.
What?
No, they're all 13.
$13, we'll say.
Okay, there we go.
$13. Bargain. Trying to make a few bucks, okay? Better door prizes next month.
So $13. If you don't know how to make a candy board, I have a great video at the High Butler website. We watched it last month that gives all the deets on how to make a candy board. Super easy, super worthwhile. And as I said in the video, it's not always about a food supply, it's about moisture mitigation. I can't recommend highly enough how important moisture mitigation is to a winter hive. Any questions?
Go on. Only a few left.
Oh, only a few left, better hurry. And how many people this is your first time here? Awesome. We have no membership requirements. We're as easygoing as it can be. We don't have officers, we don't have dues, we don't have perimeters that you have to live within. We just love to have you be at our club. We try to provide good speakers every month, including our own Jim Burt, who will be speaking at ABF next month. You get Jim here every month, and he's going to be at ABF in Las Vegas next month.
Wow.
And the last conference I will tell you about is I will be going with the Hive Butler to Cayman Reynolds. Hive Live. Hey guys, can you hear this a little bit quieter? The Hive Life Conference in Sevierville, Tennessee, which is January 4th through the 7th, maybe. Hive Life Conference put on by Cayman Reynolds, K-A-M-O-N. Cayman Reynolds is on YouTube. It's called Tennessee's Bees. This is a terrific conference, multiple days. It is not cheap to go to. Lots of really good vendors that came in, picks himself. So it's not your average beekeeping conference. It's some serious bee training and whatever. So the Hive Life Conference in Sevierville, Tennessee in January. I would recommend it highly. Oh, so I can tell you who's going to be there. So Cayman Reynolds is going to be there. Fred Dunn is going to be there. Watch Fred Dunn on YouTube. Bob Binney is going to be there. These are all some pretty big speakers, YouTube guys, and they're all going to be in one place. So it should be true. All right. Anybody else? So Dr. Tew. Did everybody read his bio? Have it here. He is there. Hold on 1 second, and I'll read his bio.
Hey, Tracy.
Hey, what?
Tracy.
Yes.
Gonna release the 101.
Oh, yeah, 101s, 102s. Glad to have you. Have fun with Jim and Dr. Foster. Here is Dr. Tew's biography. Dr. Tew is an emeritus faculty member at the Ohio State University. He is also retired from the Alabama Co-op Extension System. He has been a beekeeper for 48 years, has taught classes, provided extension services, and conducted research on honeybees and honeybee behavior. He contributes monthly articles to national beekeeping publications and has written Beekeeping Principles, Wisdom for Beekeepers, The Beekeeper's Problem Solver, and Backyard Beekeeping. He has a chapter in The Hive and the Honeybee, and he was a co-author of ABC and XYZ of Bee Culture. He is a frequent speaker at state and national meetings and has traveled internationally to observe beekeeping techniques. Jim produces a YouTube beekeeping channel and is a podcaster with Kim Slaughter at Honeybee Obscura. He has always kept bee colonies of his own. We are delighted to have Dr. Tew. Welcome, welcome.
I'm gonna change the views where it's just him. I can't see up there. Let me go back again.
Hello, Tracy.
Thank
Am I online? Everybody transmitting?
There he is.
Here
Hey,
I am.
hello.
Who's the old man there? I was listening to Tracy read all that, and you'd think I really knew something about bees. But what's really happened to me is that the longer I've kept bees, the more I realize I never knew anything. You just thought you knew something. I'll do the best I can. This continues to be, for a senior citizen like me, a remarkable medium for me to use. Is just not the same as standing in front of your class there, pacing back and forth, looking at you, trying to keep you awake, doing whatever it takes to talk about bees. So be with me here as I struggle through this thing and do the best I can. Tracy, I'm going to share my screen and go through this process, see if this works. Everything sharing there okay?
Yes.
Great, thank you.
This is a commercial. It's pretty obvious, isn't it? But the good news is, it doesn't cost you anything. One of the ways that old men like Kim and me can not just have to fade away is that we can sit at home by ourselves like we were doing here in my bee yard and talk about bees. Every Thursday morning, we have a podcast that Jeff Ott puts together for us. He does a nice job, and we're like those two old Muppet guys that was on television years ago. We just sit there and talk about particular topics that have come up. Sometimes they're useful topics. Sometimes they're remarkably unuseful. If you have an interest in podcasting and listening, we just talk for 10 or 15 minutes. That's about all the brain span we have. Then we move on to something else. I enjoy doing it. It keeps me relevant. People, I want to tell you that this queen thing is really remarkably challenging, as it should be. I forget exactly how the title came back. Why we worship the queen, worshiping the queen bee, or something like that. But somebody put the word worship in the title. Paul, Tracy, whoever did that, nice touch. Because we do, in our own beekeeper way, worship that bug. Especially my wife and those people in my life who are not in beekeeping and are just astounded that I would actually pay $35 for a bug. Yes, she is an interesting thing. And as long as I'm being a senior citizen, the thing that shocks me about beekeeping more than anything, as much as anything, let me calm that down some, is that I used to pay 75 cents for queens in 1973. When they went up to $1.25, that was high. When they went to $2.50, I thought I was just being robbed. So it's all a matter of perspective, isn't it? That all these years later, we're paying 25, 35. It looks like you could almost pay $40 for these bugs. Why would you buy this? Why would you pay this? Because she's such a critical specialist to the colony. She doesn't produce wax. She doesn't go foraging. She does two things. She produces eggs and she produces pheromones. She really is a profound specialist inside the hive. She's the genetic reservoir. She will mate with anywhere from one, she's got to find at least one boyfriend, from one drone, maybe as many, and the maximum number is 21. but probably on an average of about 12 drones. And from those 12 drones, this is me paraphrasing, she will select some of the seminal fluid from that, homogenize it in a way, and then discard most of what she's collected from all those other drones. So what she's left with then is a genetic slurry from that number of drones that she's mated with. And that's really a positive attribute for the colony, because they get a mixed bag of bees with differing abilities genetically. The early years, you know, something inside a beehive that was clearly as important as this insect was had to be a male. So in the earliest years of beekeeping literature, it was a king bee. And I suppose that it was a bit of a shock from maledom of the day to find out that indeed she was essentially female by our perspective of maleness and femaleness. All the old literature shows these sex-starved drones chasing a queen out of the colony. Really, that's remarkably not correct. Indeed, there's a good indication that workers are chasing drones away that they don't particularly want to have be mating with the queen. The workers may have more of an influence on drone selectivity than we currently understand. Now, a year or 2 or 10 from now, I may have to come back to you when I'm even 10 years older and tell you, boy, that was all a pipe dream. That was nothing. So at this point, it looks like there could be something there, but it's not proven for sure. And those queens fly out to specialized areas, and they can be miles and miles and miles away. And she flies to those specialized areas called drone congregation areas. And that's where she meets up with this genetic mix of drones from all the other colonies, also from the surrounding miles and miles. So the least thing that's happening is queens mating with drones from her own colony. There's a really solid mechanism to prevent that from happening. Now, we could spend the whole time I have tonight just talking about this mating procedure and how you use helium-filled balloons. And you try to find these drone congregation areas that are persistent, in some cases for decades. So there's a lot about this whole thing that we don't know. But it is how she mates on the wing. You know, NCBC beekeepers, it's always annoying. You'll be at the local grocery store. This is a story I'm making up, but it's the kind of thing that happens to me. And someone will say, "You're that bee guy from out at the research center, aren't you?" And I'll say, yeah, you know, I am. I'm the bee guy. And she said, "Well, the strangest thing," it was a woman I'm talking about. This was 10 years ago. "Strangest thing happened. I was out in my flower garden," and she said, "what appeared to be a honeybee queen with a drone stuck on her fell on the ground in front of me. And the two of them struggled for a while and tussled. And she said, then what I think was the queen flew away, and it looked like that the bigger bee was dead." You know, I just wanted to scream, beekeepers, because why did that lady get to see that? I would have been beyond excited if I had been able to witness that. But no, just some woman in the grocery store that I was talking to had the privilege of seeing this happen, because these queens and the drones have these nuptial affairs 25, 30 feet in the air. And it's really quite difficult to see, or to much less photograph. The way these queens are selected is bizarre too. Beekeepers, keep in mind, if the previous queen mated with a dozen drones, it's almost like you're at a family reunion if you're inside that colony and you're a bee. Because inside that colony, there are subfamilies of workers that are more closely related to each other than other subfamilies of workers inside the colony. It just looks like all a bunch of bees to us. But no doubt they genetically recognize each other. So it's almost like you sit with your family and with your grandkids at the family reunion, and the family across the way you never were very close to. Sure, you're related, but you don't see them that often and you don't like them that much anyway. So no, you don't go sit over there by them. But genetically, you're all related, but it's just that some of you are closer to different clans than others of you are to those clans. So inside that beehive, then, we don't understand how larvae are selected to become queens. But obviously, nurse bees do select larvae from different subfamilies, and they are reared into queens. And then, as you know, this whole session can now be discussed on queen replacement and whatever, because those queens then go about the business of fighting or not, because sometimes the worker bees will prevent those queens from fighting if they still have an interest in casting some after swarms. So once the swarming thing starts, there may be after swarms later that may be headed by these unmated queens that are unstable. So essentially, this queen is a modified worker. She was fed a different hormonal diet. She was fed a more highly nutritious diet. Her ovaries developed completely. Other glands developed completely. And because of the influence of hormones, some of the glands developed differently, and she turned into a queen as opposed to a worker, which is nothing more than a stunted queen. So workers never had the chance to develop their spermathecas. They never went on nuptial flights. They do different things instinctually, but any worker in that queen retinue that I'm showing in the picture here, given 3 days old or younger as a larvae, could have become that queen that has the red mark on her. So the way those bees were chosen to become queens, the mating process, everything that goes through that is one of the most intriguing aspects of this specialist inside the hive that I pay $40 for. And she comes with no guarantee. The ultimate insult is when I was paying $2.50 for a queen. If you did something really dumb, you could call the queen producer up and say, I did something really dumb, and they would more likely than not send you yet another queen. But now queens are in such demand. They're so hard to produce. They're expensive to produce. They're expensive to keep small hive beetles and varroa mites off of them until, yes, I understand why the cost has gone up. And if someone is charging that much for a queen, I didn't want to do that work. There's a lot of work to be done. And then the oddity is, when I was a young beekeeper 35, 40 years ago, we would boldly say that a queen lives anywhere at least 2 years, but after 5 years, you should be replacing that queen. And now, honestly, beekeepers, you're lucky in many cases to get a year from that queen before the bees are going to start supersedure processes, or before you as the beehive manager are going to begin to think, well, she's not getting the job done anymore, so I'm going to have to let her go. We don't know what's going on with that. Indeed, could be the drones as much as the queen that we're having problems with. But here's the bottom line. Queens just don't last as long as they used to 15, 20, 25 years ago. And the reason for that is not clearly understood. She's going to die after about a year. In my immediate family, there's 14 of us. I had 3 daughters, no sons. I got 3 useless son-in-laws, love them all dearly, but they can't wind their watch. I got 6 grandkids, 3 and 3. Out of those 14 people, one of them is a beekeeper. You can guess which one, right? The other 13, if they have any bee issues, they just bring them to me. And it's my job to take care of whatever it is. It's usually yellow jackets or hornets, but that kind of lumps in to the bee thing as far as they're concerned. So last Christmas, one of my son-in-laws got a drone. Not like a honeybee, but a drone like that flying machine. And so I kiddingly suggested that we put a queen underneath it. I didn't think the thing would pick the queen cage up. It readily picked the queen cage up. And so my non-beekeeping son-in-law really got into it and would fly that drone over my bee yard. And you could see the drones there going bonkers. That was just a mated queen. There was nothing about her that was provocative. There was no, sex pheromone that I know of that she was emitting, but those drones knew that she was there. And they were buzzing all around her. And just for one brief moment, my son-in-law was intrigued by bees and beekeeping and his new Christmas gift that he had flying around there. So I've got it in my mind now that I should get a drone for Christmas. But what would you do with that thing? How could that be used in some way? But we do know that you can make an easy picture of these drones coming to this flying machine with the queen beneath, because I'm going to probably make this comment again later on. We've been keeping bees that we know of for about 9,000 years with humans and bees interacting. That's a long time. But we've only really been selectively breeding queens the way we wanted them for about 100 years, which in the scheme of things is not a very long time. So here's what's happening. We're not yet very good at it. We know what we want. We know the characteristics that we want, but we're not able to select the male bees that the queen mates with. That still happens in the open. Someone should say, I thought we should instrumentally inseminate queens. Yes, you can. It's a remarkably technical process still. It's going to be several $1,000s to get the equipment, and it's going to require you to develop some finesse to get that done. And so the only thing that instrumental insemination is used for now is really selectively breeding for expensive breeder queens that make $27 to $35 look like chump change. These special queens can be $3,000, $4,000, and they are serious genetic reservoirs that have been instrumentally inseminated. So all this because it came up with my son-in-law flying this thing around, and the fact that we have been completely unable for us, you and me, to selectively control the drones that our queens are mating with. So what we're left with then, after all these years of keeping bees, if you go back just to the Langstroth years, what, about 150, 175 years or so of the kind of beehives that we're using, we can select beehives and we can select domiciles and management procedures. But when all is said and done, the bees select the larvae that they want to become their queen, and then they raise the drones. They're still completely in charge of that. Well, completely, unless we happen to have the instrumental insemination going on. Possibly this sophisticated toy could have some use. If you know of something, speak up, because I'd like to get one for Christmas, but it'd be nice if I could justify it in some way. High demand for these things because you folks buy them. The cost is high because it's costly to produce them. Selection procedures, I don't really know if this is still done, but when I was really involved with commercial queen production and teaching and learning and doing, you would actually swap queen stock from Indiana with maybe someone in Georgia or someone in Texas. Because it would not make a lot of sense to select for really good producing bees in southern states and then have those queens not be productive in areas that had a meaningful winter. So there were selection procedures then. I don't know that it's still done, but I cannot believe that it's not still done because it just wouldn't make any sense. The only thing that might make a difference is that some of those high-end breeder queens indeed are instrumentally inseminated, and it may be that there is no need for swapping and sending queens the way we used to do. We don't know what's up with the drones. I've mentioned that a couple of times because it's important. We don't know why drones seemingly are not as virile as they used to be or something. We don't know. The research limitations are we don't know why queens are rejected. Every one of you in the room who's kept bees more than 2 or 3 years has realized that you can pay big money for a queen, introduce her correctly, get her inside the colony, and then just a month or 2 later, she just seems to vaporize. She's just gone. Is that a disease situation, pathological? Is it a mating issue? We don't know. So I end where I start. We're a highly specialized individual that we're working with here. We have always, in our own way, to quote whoever used the word in the title, worshipped this insect. And we still don't always know exactly what's going on. This queen management thing, I would argue, is more queen monitoring because we don't really manage. So if you got a queen that's got a bad attitude, doesn't have a pretty smile, don't like the stock that she's producing, you really can't fix her other than replacing her. So either you like her or you don't. So we don't really manage that particular queen so much as we manage the concept of a queen. If the queen's not doing the job you want done, then I'll get somebody on the job who will do it right, kind of attitude. But you can't really fix that queen that's on the job. You can't change her diet. You can't brush her teeth more often or whatever it takes to make her a better queen. So it's a constant monitoring procedure. Every person, you, me, my grandkids, school kids, when you take an observation hive into a 3rd grade class in my granddaughter's room, what's the number one thing everybody wanted to see inside that observation hive? Was the queen. So it's a constant monitoring procedure where we're constantly watching either her specifically or we're watching her output. We're watching what she does on the job and do we like what she does on the job? And then we have to make a decision. I've tried to put that decision making into a series of rankings here. I think you can have bad, poor, average, good, or great queens. I rarely have ever seen a great queen. A good queen can be great for a while, but no queen is going to reach great status and stay there. Most good queens will only be good for a while and then will drop back as the season changes and things run down. Nectar sources dry up and the season moves on. For my designation of poor and average, I've learned to check the season. If it's hopeless, if it's already over into September and I've got a poor queen and this colony is depleted, beekeepers, we got to face the music there that future for that colony is not great. Bees die all the time. Bees have always died all the time. It's one of the things that bees seem to really know how to do is to die. I mean, right now they're in the radiator of all the cars in the parking lot outside your building there. Right now, every time a worker bee stings you, what happens to her? A boy bee finds a female queen and they're successful at mating. What happens to the drone? And then that queen goes back to the colony and lives how long? And the worker bees do what? They live for about 3 to 4 weeks in the summer, maybe twice that in the winter, and then they die. So there's just bees dying all the time. I hate it. I hate it. I want to get my colony up to 55, 60,000. I want it to stay there, be healthy, be happy, and be a good looking unit. And it's always waxing and waning and building population and decreasing and swarming. It's just a busy, busy thing all the time. So I look at the season and think this is a poor queen, but the season's already progressed so far that if I rushed up and invested $40 in a queen, they're still going to die in the winter. And then you're going to be drawn into saying, well, I'll give them some brood from the other colonies. Don't start eating your seed corn. So don't take from really good productive colonies and then try to support those that are not coming along well once the season is beyond you. And I'm telling you that because many of you, most of you probably are going to want to help. You're the beekeeper. You should do something. So I'll just step in here. I will feed them. I will insulate this colony. I'll do whatever. In reality, if that colony were in the wild, it would die. Those swarms that issue and get away from you and go out to a new swarm site and start all over again and set up comb building and try to initialize a new nest site, only about 20% of those are going to survive the first year. It is really harsh in nature. Now, the second year, things get better, and as many as 80% will survive the second year. It's so easy to get off the subject because this is what happens as those colonies die off. They just didn't make it. Who knows? I don't know why they didn't make it. Let's just say the queen didn't mate adequately enough and she became a drone layer. And so this new swarm died. But it did manage to put aside about 3 pounds of honey. Well, you just better know that when a dearth comes along, and there's nothing else out there, that those foragers will become what beekeepers call robbers. But I would argue that they're still just foragers. All they're doing is foraging on their neighbors' colonies. They're not really doing anything other than just trying to find the best bang for the buck. So even when that colony dies out, robbing takes over. And if they had any resources left there, they're scrounged up and taken back to the colonies that are still surviving. So I'm off the subject on this because this is all one huge loop. It's one seasonal loop, and it never begins and it never ends with bees. The basic idea of a natural bee nest is to start building brood in January and February, build the brood up as much as they can on the resources that are coming in and the pollen that they've got stored primarily in their bodies until new pollen starts to come in. Build that population up as quickly as they can. So as soon as they can, use divine wisdom almost on how to split the colony, how big to make the swarm, when to send it. Will that swarm have a chance of making it? And will what's left inside the colony with the new queen, will they be able to hang on? So all this because you've got to decide when you step into this world, because what we're doing, beekeepers, is we're trying to make the bees do something that they would not do naturally. Our goal is to pump these bees up in the spring, have these super queens, because that's what we're all talking about tonight. How to get this turbocharged queen that can produce an uncanny amount of brood, build this thing up, then stop it from swarming, and then give it limitless room so it will produce more honey than it would ever consume in 10 years of natural nest honey consumption. And that's our goal because we want the surplus honey and we want the pollination services that they provide. The bees' goal on a natural standpoint is to swarm as often as possible and that way extend this genetic reach literally having dozens of eggs in one basket in the form of 8 or 9 or 10 swarms that issue per year, instead of having this one mega hive and depending on you, the beekeeper, to maintain it. So you got a poor or a bad queen. Only do something about that when the colony can respond to the effort that you're making with the big picture in mind. What's the season coming up? What's going to be happening to swarming? Am I controlling varroa as much as I can? So that last point I've got there is that beekeeper skills are required. These management procedures, I've been voicing concerns about it. I've been saying things, I don't know what I should be saying or not, but I've gotten to where I really question beekeepers, the things that we've always told new beekeepers to do when handling these queens. Well, you look at this and you say, oh, wow, a new beekeeper, you got a real poor queen there. I'd recommend you go buy one right away and replace that queen. Well, that's a broad recommendation, isn't it? Because we just discussed the fact that maybe you should just live with the queen you got till next spring, then put a queen in when you got a better chance. And if they're dead, at least you didn't put a new queen in it and have that die too. So just whimsically going to purchase queens. And my 49 years now has gone from being remarkably cheap, readily available, queens everywhere, to being raised only by really competent, sophisticated beekeepers who are able to pull this trick off. Purchasing queens whimsically is not nearly as easy or as practical as it used to be, and yet it's still a common recommendation. Then I'm frequently concerned, once somebody pays $35 for a queen, do you know what you do with it? Can I have a drink of water? I talked to the Colorado beekeepers 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, just like this. And after it was over, I had a little tickly throat. Didn't think much about it. Well, the next morning I thought a lot about it and ended up with some kind of viral infection. And it wasn't COVID. Well, this is what happens. When you get a viral respiratory infection and it's not COVID, what you don't get is sympathy. Everybody says, oh, great. You don't have COVID. Go home, get plenty of rest, take fluid. Well, you feel terrible, but there's nothing to really be done about it. So this is really yesterday. This is the most I've talked probably in 2 weeks after getting over that. So I'm glad to be able to chat with you tonight, but it was an experience to be perfectly happy not to have the pandemic issue, but to have something that you didn't get a lot of sympathy for from the medical people because they had other things they were concerned about. All right, enough about that, other than the fact that I will be drinking water periodically to keep my throat wet. So once we get these new beekeepers and these expensive queens, and we tell them to introduce them, well, we've done nothing different. Our recommendation for introducing queens is still based on what it was when queens were readily available and when queens were affordable. That's all changed. But yet our basic recommendations for how queens should be introduced has not changed at all. Kim and I argue, Kim Flottam and I argue at times in a friendly way, and I don't disagree, not when all is said and done. But Kim just says, well, you just leave them in longer. And he's right. But that deeply concerns me. And the truth in my story is that when I have invested in a queen, I drove to some great distance to pick her up. I brought her back. I did everything I was supposed to do. I put her inside the colony. I'm going to leave her there now, not just the typical 3 to 5 days. I'm going to leave her there for 10 days. Well, I just barely sleep at night, lying there thinking, should I be out there? But what is she? Are they covering that cage? Is this a cool night? Should I put more insulation on top of that nest? Is she in the good position? And so I just worry all the time about it. So I am reluctant to say just leave in longer, because beekeepers, I don't know how long she was in the cage when I got her. If you buy a queen in the summer, she was probably produced in the spring. And she's been caged and banked in a colony for all that length of time. That's generally how those queens are held, because it's too hard to keep those baby nukes operational throughout the summer months. Cage design hasn't changed either. So I don't know of any hotshot new cages. It's been my observation in my bee life that the more options that I have, that means that our opinion is not yet made. So right now, look at how many options I have for controlling varroa, which means that we don't yet have the best option for controlling varroa, because we're still looking, we're still searching. And look at the queen cage thing. We got all these options of queen cages. I've left this comment here that super queens require super beekeepers. So until you're a super beekeeper, you probably just want to do the best you can with the queen thing and not look for the finest queen you can get. In the old days, there were cheaper queens, but now it's just a queen. It's just a queen cost. That's what it costs. There are no cheap queens. There's no low-end queen producers. Either you're a high-end queen producer or you don't do it. This is a queen that I paid $25 for it back when $25 was a lot of money. And what's wrong with her? Other than the fact that she's dead, what's wrong with her? Excuse me just a minute. I want to turn my head. I want to cough. I'm sorry. I don't know why she's dead. I have no idea, but to come back out the next day and to see her laying there was just more than I could deal with. I have no idea. She was dead the next day. I'm right best queen here. And can you see, is my cursor work on your screen?
Yes.
If I do this,
Yep.
can you see what's left of my queen there? So I went from this nice queen, great retinue, to my queen out in the compost pile in front of the colony there. You just realize, beekeepers, that we're visitors. We're visitors in this world of bees. And sometimes it's just not my thing. I've retired now essentially twice. And I like the parties. I like the plaques that go on the wall. I like a great job. You were really meaningful, all the stuff you want to hear because now you're an old guy. I don't like the bees' procedure of retiring their queens, where they chew off the wings. Years ago, I saw 3 body parts connected in front of a beehive: head, thorax, and abdomen. And those 3 body parts were writhing. She had no legs, no wings, no antennae. It's just disgusting. And that's a terrible procedure, bees. Just toss her out front and let the ants get her, or the yellow jackets. Why did you got to mutilate her? So here's a queen that's had her wings chewed off before she was tossed out front. So I've already said, I think this is a terrible retirement procedure. And I'd rather go along with the formality of what I've been going through, where you get the kind of declining respect. The workers have my throat's bad, but I can talk. If you'll let me cough, I'm fine. I'm sorry. There's no way you can help me. I've got to deal with this on my own. The worker bees have a good deal of control. If they don't lighten this cap right here, they're the ones doing that. The queen won't come out as readily. You see where she's starting to cut this right here to open it up? That's her doing that from the inside. But the worker bees have thinned it out. And if they don't want that queen to be coming out on her own that fast, they can contain her in there and keep putting wax back on it and containing her there inside until they decide that she should be released. So they have a lot of control over it. Your room should be totally dark now because this is the dark period. This is when Jim Tew loses sleep. Is that queen going to be accepted? Did that virgin queen, did she find that drone congregation area and did she successfully copulate with drone to wait? And you wait. And people like Jim Tew tell other people like Jim Tew, no, don't bother that colony. Leave it alone. Let the queen establish herself and come back. And I wait and I wait. And in my heart, I know while I'm waiting, if I need to buy another queen, the clock's running. So is she in there or is she not in there? So this period of time, nothing can be done. There's nothing you can do. You just have to wait to see if this process is going to happen, or if a blue jay or the bird of your choice managed to pick out that queen when she was taking that nuptial flight to that drone congregation area. I can't get the authorities to agree on this, but apparently those mating swarms, when you get a call and it's a small swarm and it's being headed by a virgin queen, it's hard to hive, it's skittish because the queen doesn't really have any pheromonal control over that little cluster about the size of a baseball. A good mating swarm size would be about the size of a softball. The thought is that it's like the herring effect, that small swarm is with the queen to help her find her way to the drone congregation area and to offer targets for birds, or I guess it'd be primarily birds, that maybe the queen just doesn't stand out like a lone target up there. I guess it'd be like fighter aircraft accompanying bombers in a sense, if I'm looking for an analogy. So while we're waiting through this dark period, did she make it or not? Did she come back? Is she okay? What's going on? So it's really rewarding when finally it's over and she's back and she's inside the colony, or at least you've seen her. In Photoshop, this is not my expertise. Again, this isn't, I just about missed this technology window here at my age. But this was the best I could do in Photoshop of taking a virgin queen and making her roughly the same size based on her thorax. And what I'd like to show you is the business end here. She's short on this unmated queen, almost a full body segment, abdominal segment. So actually her wings here don't grow. Same length over here on the mated queen. Same is true for the thorax. Same thing. The only thing that expands is her reproductive system there toward the back. And as that develops and her ability to produce pheromones develop, you can see how she's able here on this side to have this really nice retinue around her. And you can see on this side that she ain't getting no respect. I mean, she's just really not doing much. She can't do anything. She's not yet reached her potential for doing anything. These bees over here on the other side, I wish I could take that red line off now. When one of these bees reaches out and licks or grooms this queen right here, let's just say it's this one. When that bee touches that queen and perceives that queen substance, that queen pheromone, 9-oxo-2-decanoic acid, and then this, I don't know what happened there. Hang on, let me get my picture back. And then that bee turns around and feeds this bee behind it. She transfers that pheromone that she got, some of it, to another bee. Then another bee transfers. So every one of those bees that transfer food, trophallaxis is the B word, term, they get a molecular level of that pheromone. So they chemically know that there's a queen inside the colony because they've all shared that queen substance when they share food amongst themselves by each bee feeding other bees. But where I'm trying to get with this, and almost off the subject, is that at some point the queen gets fed. Ironically, she has to be refed a minuscule amount of her own pheromone. That not happening or that happening, depending either way, will incite her to just make some decision about swarming or supersedure. Because bees can build supersedure cells or swarming cells all day, but they don't have some method of force, some threat to make the queen put an egg in those cells. The queen has to do it on her own volition. And that volition is frequently caused or inspired by this pheromonal feedback mechanism that she needs to get in order for her to decide what decision she makes. Is she on the job or not? So in essence, she's deciding whether or not she's going to commit suicide, because if she puts eggs in those cells, starts this supersedure thing, starts this swarming thing, then she's out of a job. These cage things, you can make these. This is straight from Lowe's building supply, 8-mesh hardware cloth. If you really use your imagination, because I'm sitting here 2 feet from the screen and you're probably 20 feet from the screen, right there is a green mark. That queen that died, that's her mark right there. She's the one I saw outside later on. So you buy this and you fold this down so that it's about 1/2 inch thick, and then you press that over the comb. It's really a decent way to introduce a queen. The bees will quickly cut underneath that somewhere along there and release her fairly fast. So it's easy to make. You don't have to buy them, but there's all kinds of queen cages. I'm sorry, beekeepers. I built this thing. I don't know where it is, but it was cheap to build. It was fun to build. I've never seen but one, and the one I had, I made it and I lost it. You take a piece of scrap PVC and at my small finger here, just stick with glue a piece of fiberglass window screening on it. This is just a cap that fits over the PVC, and I cut a slot there so that the bees could feed the queen inside there or through the screen. And what I was trying to do, I did do, was make a one-handed queen cage. So I can hold the queen and the cap in one hand, capture the queen, drop her inside that cell, put the cap on, kaboom, she's capped. I mean, she's caged. And I didn't confine her. I didn't have to handle her. I didn't crush her abdomen. I didn't drop her. I didn't do any of those kind of things. But the problem is, of course, that round cage has no place to go inside a colony. So you've got to have some kind of shim on top, spacer or something. And then you know what happens. Then you're in bed at night, wondering if they're covering that cage on top of that spacer where you've got out there. Should you have done something else? And so this is where the worry starts. But I only put this in because it was cheap to do. And it's the only one-handed queen cage that I ever have known of. All these others are going to require, both hands to get them done. Sounds like I'm trying to sell the thing to you. I'm not. I don't care. This is a bad queen, beekeepers. So if you've got this right now and it's June the 18th, this is a colony for requeening. Something went horribly wrong. She's not even a very good drone layer. So just to get a good perspective of what's not working, you see all the things that are wrong. The bees that are still there are foraging. Look how they got all the nectar that they've stored inside the brood area there. Shouldn't be there. They were using pollen for a while. They're not collecting it. No demand for it because there's no larvae there. A scruffy queen cell down here that looks terrible. So overall, If it's June, if this is July the 5th, definitely I'm gonna requeen this one. If it's July the 28th, August the 1st, I want to know more, but probably by August the 10th, getting really late because I got to build it up 21 days before there's any worker bees coming out, probably about 35 days before there's actually totally workers that are replacing the bees that have died there. Got to factor that in. Don't have a place to say this other than here. If you decide, I'm just going to kill this queen or just replace her, I mean, probably going to kill her. What else are you going to do with her? And I'll let them raise their own. Okay, it's a good idea. It happens all the time in nature. It's a good idea if you're a natural bee nest. If you're trying to manage that queen or monitor the queen, as I said, then you got to monitor this. It's going to take 16 days for her to grow into a queen. It's going to take about 5 days for her to emerge and wander around and scuffle with other queens and do whatever. And then it's going to take anywhere from 2 to 5 days, depending on the weather, for her to take mating flights. In good areas, sometimes one flight is enough. I've already mentioned this hearing effect. She's very, very dangerous being outside that nest. So much so, she just does it twice. Once when she mates, once when she swarms. Generally, that's the only 2 times that a queen sees the world. So then by the time that they've already done this, you're what, 35 to 40 days into it. And then by the time she's actually laying eggs, which is about 3 to 4 more days, then you tack on 21 days on top of that. So the day that you decided to let this colony raise its own queen, you need to add about 52 days before that queen, hypothetically, would be producing new offspring. So if this is July, boy, you're into the middle of September or so before that queen begins to do that. Still, we do it all the time. I do it all the time. I can't tell you that something you gotta, I'm sorry, let me just, when I use that pen to draw and then I touch, strange things happen here in Worcester, Ohio to my PowerPoint program. So it's my problem, it's not yours. I've got it under control to a degree. This happens all the time. It's a lot like American foul brood. Everybody says, you got American foul brood, you got to burn it. Well, in your mind, if it's American foul brood, it must be a real scruffy, bummed, rotted out colony. I mean, it's everything else is bad. But I've had to burn some really beautiful equipment that was essentially brand new. So this queen was remarkably poor. She looked great, good attitude, happy smile, nice personality. Only thing was she was a spotty layer. She just never got off the ground. But if you wanted to photograph a queen, a finer queen you can't get from that standpoint. So sometimes, beekeepers, she can really be, by our standards, golden queen, nice formed, full abdomen, everything that she's doing just looks great, except she looks terrible when the brood pattern is coming along. So sometimes you have to go through and replace her. This is where I put a mark on her. I'm embarrassed about the mark. It used to be so easy, put these marks on queens, and now my bifocals don't work, my fingers don't work, the paint's not what it used to be. So here she is. I wish now that I'd shaken the bees off to show you what a marginal pattern it was, but here she is over here, and you can see behind that there's no brood there. It should have looked like that. But what she was doing, if you can kind of look beyond the bees, was really pretty minimal, but she looked decent. So I want to tell you that even if you've done this for all these years, or if you've done it for 1 year, it's still difficult to say, well, this is clearly what needs to be done. No, what needs to be done is not clear at all. Is she going to get better at it? Is this a seasonal thing? Is she defective? Should you be on the phone right now seeing who's got a queen? Let her raise her own. Everything about this now is a question that you have to resolve, trying to get it back to looking like something like this. It's not an easy decision many times. I was standing in my bee yard, literally, honestly, standing in my bee yard with my terrible hearing. And I thought that there was some kind of, I don't know, maybe it was one of these toy drone things flying above me, an odd aircraft sound. And I realized, unlike the woman in the grocery store who saw the queen's mating, that this was the day that a swarm was coming into an empty equipment in my bee yard. And the reason it was exciting was because none of my bees in my bee yard were swarming. They were all very calm and normal looking. And yet right above me here was all these bees coming in. And they moved into a colony with pinpoint precision. What a grand day that is, beekeeping, because I got your bees. I picked up somebody else's swarm. So that made up for all the bees I've given you through the years. So told my wife, celebratory glad handing. I'm a great beekeeper. See what I'm doing. I didn't even know that was to be used as a trap colony. Great job, Jim. About a week to 2 weeks later, you go into my bee yard, and just the time you open the gate back there, it's just a barricade fence. The bees fly right over it. It's just so my neighbors won't see everything I'm doing back there. My neighbors think I'm crazy anyway, with white clothes and the funny veil and the smokers and the secretive things back there. So a fence is really a good thing for neighboring beekeepers and whatever. So when I open that gate, I would be accosted by these bees almost right away. Where are they coming from? I mean, I got 15 colonies here. So, it's really annoying because you're the beekeeper. I'm in charge here. And here's this bee right in front of your face, challenging you. Well, it got worse. It got worse and worse. And so I couldn't even go back there. Forget going back there with a cup of coffee in the morning and looking at the bee colonies because they run you out of the yard. I suspected the swarm, but I couldn't prove it. And then what laid it to rest was my neighbor, who is don't have him anymore. He's gone now, the big gone, was a double lung transplant. And he told me that the yellow jackets were stinging him. It was early spring, it was just May 6th or so. And you think yellow jackets are not really populated yet, still in the queen stage. Beekeepers, I'll ask you the question I had to struggle with. When is not telling all the truth actually a lie? Because I knew that yellow jackets were not what was stinging him on his lawnmower. I knew what was stinging, and I knew I had to do something. I named those bees, that colony, a sentinel colony, because it didn't just guard itself. It guarded the whole yard. You couldn't go back there. So I decided I'm going to kill them. I'm going to take a soap compound, just like we have to do with AFB, and I'm going to kill them. But which one? Do you just pick out one hive and kill it and hope that has the desired effect on all the other colonies? You better straighten up. Don't sting him. He'll kill you. He'll spray soap on you. So I decided that you can't just start killing bees. You really need a judge and jury here to decide which one it is. I decided that I would just blame it on that swarm. And so instead of killing it, I packed it up and I moved it to a penal colony about 40 miles away and set that thing out in the bushes by itself. And beekeepers, I'm happy to tell you that it was that colony, and my yard went back to normal. And the reason I'm putting you through all this is, what do you want to do with that queen? Do you want to open that colony up, dig through that colony with all of that thing attacking you and pawing through, trying to find that queen to replace it? So sometimes these things turn into headaches when these queens go rogue on you. I need to finish this. I'm really getting out of time here, but here's what happened. A bear, one of the first bears in this county in 100 years, it made the newspaper, found that one colony and scattered it all over about a 50-foot radius area there. And we got the word, just like you've had a bear down here. Haven't been bears here in Tuscarawas County, Ohio in 100 years. And we went down and they decided it was a lone young male black bear passing through that scattered that beehive all over. I put it back together and I found the cluster and put it all back in. They were feisty, angry, ugly bees still. They've learned nothing from me. They've learned nothing from the bear. These bees just cannot be taught anything. And I thought, well, you'll die in the winter. And they didn't. They survived the winter. So where I leave this thing is that obnoxious colony was stunningly resilient and was able to hang on when anything else would have killed this colony. So I leave you then. The queen finally died a natural death. The colony lingered 2 more years before it died from neglect and varroa, because it was 40 miles away from me. I never went down there. So what I'm telling you, though, is that sometimes these queens can have a remarkable effect on you and what's happening in the bee yard when they're affecting everything else. On multiple occasions, maybe as many as 8 to 9 times through my years, I open that queen cage to release that queen when I'm installing packages, and she comes out of that cage like her rear end is on fire and she's gone. And you stand there looking at your empty cage and realizing that your mouth is hanging open. The primary thing that you can do is just leave it right there. She's completely lost. She's stumbling around out in the wilderness somewhere. Don't close the colony up. Don't do anything else. Stop where you are frequently. How many times? I don't know. 3 times out of 10, 5 to 6 times out of 10, she will find that pheromone field set up. But you see, she's not really bonded with that package. Those aren't her bees. She's only been with them for probably 4 or 5 days, as old as that package is. So this is a challenging issue for you when you have flighty queens and you release the queens directly. Others would say, well, why do you do that? Well, it gets involved in queen introduction, how long she's been in the cage, and things that are beyond the scope here. Marking the queens, I've talked about it already. I think this is Sue Colby's fingers. If it is Sue, I can't use a point that big. So I would use something much smaller, but really marking the queens is a good idea because it lets you have some idea if your colony has swarmed, and it does help you find the queen, and it does make you feel like that you're doing something constructive when you mark and keep up with the queen. I hadn't marked the queen in several years, so I practiced on drones. And I marked 40 or 50 drones and kind of got to get into it. You know, you're sitting there catching drones, nothing else to do in the bee yard. So I marked a bunch of these drones, and it was really kind of entertaining because you could find them throughout the apiary for the rest of the summer there pretty much, until finally there was no more white marked drones left. I didn't see any science in that, but it was enjoyable. Marking the queens is a good idea. Here on my filing cabinet beside me from the Alabama Beekeepers Association, I've got the queen color code. So look it up on the web. But right now the color code is white. And next year the color code for queen marks will be yellow. So go ahead and be getting your paint ready to start marking your queens. How about finding queens? This guy on the left has his work cut out for him. He kind of looks like he's got the weight of the world on his shoulders here. I would have the weight of the world on me too if I had to find it. This is my beehive. I don't even look for the queen. under those situations. I mean, do whatever you got to do in that colony and get out. This thing is a monstrosity. I've been writing about it in bee culture because I just can't deal with these big colonies anymore, these full deeps of bees like that. So I'm going to see if I can't downsize. You know, it's almost like getting a smaller house or something. Instead of 3 deeps, 4 deeps, 3 supers. Can I just figure out some way to keep these things in 1 deep? That means I want to have swarming. But under all of these conditions, especially this unit up here, even if you find the queen, she's going to be stuck in that burr comb honey. These bees out here are out on the front of the hive. They're hot, they're unemployed, and they don't like you. If you think you want to find the queen in this thing, it needs to be a crystal clear reason why you needed to find the queen there. So there is no good way to find the queen. After I finish talking, ask the experienced beekeeper sitting next to you if you really need to, but use multiple queen excluders. Put those things in there and divide the brood nest as much as you can, and then go back 5 days later, and at least you can begin to tell which box has the eggs. Because otherwise you've got to go through the whole colony. And while you're running through the whole colony, she's running all over. She had a red mark on her years ago. I knew she was in this nuke. I looked in the nuke, I looked in the nuke, I looked in the nuke. It was just 4 frames and a 5-frame nuke. I know she's here. I've got to make up an observation hive for a class I'm teaching. And beekeepers, this is the true story. After 20 minutes of looking, of knowing that that queen is in that box, it hit me. The only place that that queen could be had to be on the bottom of my shoe. And that's where she was. Stuck in the treads of one of my boots was a bright red dot of that queen where she came out of that colony when I was working with her there, or she dropped off or something, and I stepped on her. So it is not easy to find queens. I am optimistic that with all the technology that's going on and all the miniaturizing everything, that surely in the not too distant future, there's going to be some app on your phone where you'll sit there and just say, oh yeah, she's in the second deep there, 3rd frame, go right to her. Yep. But that point's not here yet. What do you think, beekeepers? This is one way of equalizing your colonies. This is a hive stand that collapsed. And it was beautiful beehives, and there's no figuring anything out. Only the bees know, and they're not sure. So I end on this note. This insect in the bee world is really one of the specialized individuals, but you can't say that she's the end all, because she's nothing without at least 400 workers to care for her and keep the nest going. And ideally, as many as 2,000 to 3,000 before she gets up to 60, 70,000. So yes, she's really unique, but she is nothing without the remainder of the colony. Every bee, worker, drone, or queen plays their role in this whole thing. They only have about 22 weeks. About 40% of every year is the time they have to capture honey, get the swarm out there, get the swarm set up, take enough honey with them to produce about 5,000 cells. You've got to go to work immediately to get enough honey from the environment, to get enough honey to survive the winter, or you know what's going to happen. And you're going to be in the 80% that doesn't survive the first year. So it's a particularly difficult, demanding natural cycle. We help everywhere that we can. But I need to, I guess, to tell you that beekeeping in a box isn't the way the bees would do it. So sometimes we tend to run into struggling sources of challenges. Can't control swarming. Can't figure out why the queen doesn't live longer than a year. Maybe the fact that she's produced more bees already than she would produce in a normal lifetime in the wild for some reason. But there it is. It's an overview of the queen, the headache, the cost, her job description, her job failure, and how life goes on. I'm sorry about the coughing spell I went through. I got over it, but I admitted to you, I've not been on the straight road here for a while, but I feel good now. It feels good to feel good. So, Paul or Tracy, whoever's the officer there, I'll give it back to you and I'll stop sharing my screen.
Do you have a few minutes to take any questions?
I do, if you'd like that.
I would love to. Anybody have any questions for Dr. Tew? Kristen Lee, I thought of you when we were hearing about birds and swarms coming out of a hive. So any questions? No one? Okay, all right, come on up. Come on up. Here's our speaker. He can hear you. Thank you.
All right, so when we start talking about the longevity of the queens, and then we look in the different catalogs and you see Carnolians and Russians and Italians and all these different species of bees, do they all have limited longevity, or do the different species last longer based on whether they're those different kinds of bees?
Oh. Thank you for a nice question, sir. And you're going to have to allow me guessing within reason. They all have about the same longevity. They're all exposed to the same environmental factors. I can't think of any bee that's noted for living longer, any bee race that's noted for living longer. Those bees are primarily the ones that you choose, chocolate or vanilla. The breeders who select for those orange bees that have the orange abdomens like those bees because they stand out and they look regal on the comb. The breeders that select for the darker queens, the Carniolans, you used to be able to get Caucasians, but can I say without offending someone that I don't know of a good source? If there's a good source for Caucasians right now, the Caucasian race of bees, let me know. I don't know who's doing that anymore. But the Carniolans are quieter, are supposed to be better in tune with our environmental resources. But I got to tell you, people, you're going to have bigger problems controlling varroa, controlling swarming, getting them through the winter, keeping raccoons away. Getting the finest queen you can get is just going to be one of several things. So the main thing is, can I quote a commercial beekeeper? The main thing that you want from her is that she's alive. I sat through a discussion and the question was asked of 6 commercial beekeepers. What strain do you look for? Just like you're asking me here. What characteristics do you look for? And the commercial beekeeper said, the primary characteristic I want is that she's alive. He said that when you buy 5,000 to 6,000 queens a year, you have to take what you can get. And in many cases, that's not the worst way to go for us. So if you're a great beekeeper and you're really into this and you really want to specialize in it, then go for the finest queens you can get. And that's going to be some of the Carniolan varieties or someone who's raised small batch queens or whatever. But if you're in it for honey production and you've got a full-time life and you got kids in school and you're probably going to have a swarm get away from you, I wouldn't spend that much money on a queen because she's going to be the insect hanging in the tree over here when the swarm goes with your nice red dot on it, or in this case, next to your yellow dot. So you decide. Beekeeping is not a right by the number thing. You decide what you want. Now, finishing up on this, I've dragged out this whole thing. No, they don't live any longer that I know of. They do have differing characteristics. You would need to be a really good beekeeper for those characteristics to be life and death to you and that colony. Thank you for the question.
Anybody else? I feel like from listening to you that you do not seem to be a beekeeper who tries to prevent swarms. That was sort of what I picked up there, that swarming is a natural process. I feel honored that I have sent as much genetics out into the wilderness as I have. I think that's a good thing. So is there a school of thought that some people just don't prevent swarming because you're working against their nature, so you allow it? Or do you believe in just trying to manage against that desire of the bees?
Yep. Thank you for making me think. In the wild, bees swarm eagerly, enthusiastically. Their genetic survival depends on it.
Right.
It's a common thing. We try to suppress that swarming because every time the colony swarms, there goes a good part of your honey crop, if not all of it. So there's more than one of me in here. One beekeeper says this is a perfectly normal process. They're going to go out there, if they can find a previous nest site, they've got about a 60 to 70% chance of surviving the winter. If they start over, happiness is not going to be coming their way probably, but they're out there foraging, things look good. So there's that. Then the other one of me is the one that just anguishes over that 6-pound swarm that's hanging 40 feet in the air in a locust tree right out behind my shop here, and then just tormented me for almost 6 days. I mean, I tried slingshots. I'm in town, more or less. I've got neighbors close on both sides, and I've got space front and back. But you can't be firing a weapon. You can't be doing too much with the bow and arrow. I tried everything I could think of, and the bees just taunted me. There was no way to get comb up there. So the other one of me is just absolutely miserable when you see that swarm go, because I'm very traditionally trained beekeeper. You want the colony to build up, you want to make honey production, you want good bees for pollination, you want all that's commercial beekeeping. The biologist in me says that's not the bee's way. This is what we do with apples, with Holstein cattle, with corn. We do it with everything that we do. We select, breed, and make these improved varieties, but we've not yet fully managed to do it with bees. So Tracy, if I had to give you an honest answer, it really depends. If it's a swarm that you know you can't get, if you know that it's gone, then be the biologist. If it's a swarm that you think you can hive and get inside a box, then be the beekeeper and put that thing away. And then there's justification for doing that too.
Perfect answer. Anybody else?
But I'd like to learn from both. When I'm standing inside a swarm moving, it's like a biological wonderment moment. See, those bees have no interest in attacking and stinging me because they're not defensive. There's no home site to defend. Indeed, every one of those bees is important to that future of that cluster setting up, building those first combs. So why would you go out be looking for a fight? So swarms are notoriously gentle while they're in flight, while they've just hung there for a day or so. Now, if they hang there for a while, get kind of defensive about that site, use up the resources they've taken, they can turn into a dry swarm. And they can be really testy when you go shake that branch. So at this point, they're in good shape if they can get out there and get it going. So I gave you a convoluted answer, but it worked both ways. Thank you for asking.
Absolutely. Remind me sometime to tell you about when I hit a swarm from my own hive with the school bus I was driving.
I wish you would tell that story. I don't know anything about this.
I drove a school bus for 7 years, and I was driving in the area where I had some hives, And as I came down the road, I could see something in the air in the middle of the road. And I thought, gee, that looks like a swarm of bees. And I had a busload of kids, and you don't swerve the bus, of course.
Right.
Right. And it was very near where I had hives, and why I just smacked the windshield right into a swarm full of bees, and felt very disappointed about it, and recognized that it truly is a miracle that a queen ever gets back. And
Yep.
yep, there was not much I could do about it, and figured that was my own swarm, and that's what I got. So once in a lifetime, probably.
Tracy, I've done that one time. You're exactly right. One time I drove through a swarm, and the car windshield sounded like the bees were made of velvet.
Oh,
They,
wow.
they didn't crackle against the window. They were just soft thumps against the window.
Well, mine was a good solid hit right at eye level, so.
We drive the big yellow school
Yeah,
bus.
yeah, the windshield isn't very tapered on the school bus. It's pretty much a flat hit, so. Thank you very much for your time. Really enjoyed it. So glad to have you.
Listen, I need to apologize. I'm sorry about the coughing thing, but I'm happy to be healthy.
I don't think anyone was bothered by it a bit, so thank you.
I have sat here for the last hour or so yelling at the wall in front of me. Thank you. Thank you. All right.
Glad to have you. Have a
Thank you
great
very much.
weekend.
I'll see you. Happy Thanksgiving.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for being here.